Where's your tree? Your Christmas tree? Still set up. I like that. Yesterday wasn't a particularly good day for us. It was the day the vacuum cleaner broke, and that's not a good day for the vacuum cleaner to break on Tree Day. We like to leave our tree up all through the 12 days of Christmas, but since I was going to be here and not home, we decided to take it down yesterday. We have a good division of labor. My daughter sits around and does nothing. My wife and I do all the work. And then when it comes time to move the tree, we figured out, we left the tree up, and when you leave your tree up, hopefully till Epiphany, it starts to change and become quite brittle. And one time we took it out of the den and around through the kitchen and then out through the foyer and out the front door, and we noticed that every pine needle that God had ever created was between where the tree was and where it went. So now what we do is we leave the tree up because we want to leave it up till Epiphany, but the tree is by the window. It's nice to look at the house and see the lights by the window. We just open the window and shove the tree out. And it works pretty well. Whatever your plan is, I would want to encourage you, tree or no tree, to keep celebrating Christmas. The Christmas season begins on Christmas and lasts 12 days to Epiphany. Epiphany is the day we celebrate the visit of the wise ones who came from the east and who got this whole gift-giving thing started in the first place. Epiphany, like Christmas, is a celebration of Christ's presence among us. It comes from the Greek word for appearance or manifestation, the appearance of God with us. And like I said, it's traditionally when we associate with the visit of the wise men. And many parts of the world, their big celebration is going to be tomorrow, particularly in Eastern Europe. This is when they're going to open their gifts. The season of Christmas begins in Matthew with Christmas. Begins with Luke in Christmas, and it ends with Epiphany in the story from Matthew's Gospel. In Luke's Gospel, the audience that hears of Christ's birth, the royal family themselves, the shepherds, they're surprised by the news, particularly the shepherds. In Matthew's Gospel, it's not a surprise at all. Those who are looking for the Christ are quite intentionally looking for him. They're traveling and following a star. They are seekers. My suggestion to you is that we too are seekers. That's why we're here week in and week out. We're seeking God's peace, God's presence, and our purpose by being here. So, like the travelers from the east, we seek. Now, we may not be all that adept at following stars. I can't give you any advice on how to follow a star. But in this text itself, I think there are 3 lessons that we can learn from these wise travelers from the east. One is about direction, one is about devotion, and one is about redirection. Now, Matthew doesn't tell us too much about the wise men. We tend to assume that there were 3 of them because there were 3 different gifts. But there could have been more, there could have been fewer. What we do know, and what is of critical importance, is where they are from. They're from the east. And if you're a map-oriented person like me, I want you to understand that being from the east here is of critical importance. One of the most secure borders in all the world is the River Jordan that has Israel on the west and Jordan on the right. It is a very clear boundary between Jew and Gentile. and it is of particular importance to us that when God sent a birth announcement out by shooting a star up in the sky, God sent a birth announcement out to everybody, not just the people on this side of the line. That is very, very good news. It's not just good news for the Jews, for one people, it's good news for all of us. Now, that good news about direction, pardon the pun, goes both ways. First, with God sending out an invitation to all, to outsiders, to foreigners, or what we in the South might refer to as foreigners. Good news of a great joy to all the people, all of us and all of them. Second, this news about direction is helpful in following the direction of the Magi themselves. They answered that invite and they followed the star. They even stopped and asked for directions. God sends us in new directions, and just as God sent them over that line, so many times when God points us in a new direction, it is a direction that will take us over the line to someplace new, someplace and someone different. Isn't that the way God offers directions? More often than not, calling us out of our comfort zones. You want me to go where? So the wise ones followed God's directions. They followed the star, looking for the child who would be born King of the Jews. They took a risk and followed. Now, maybe you've heard the phrase or seen the bumper sticker, "Wise ones still seek him." Well, they do. We do. And that means getting up out of our religious recliners and going where God would have us go. So the Magi followed directions, and that sense of direction led them to devotion. They followed the star, and they stopped to see Herod and told him they were going and following this star to find this child born a king, that they might pay him homage. What does that mean, to pay homage? I like the language of the poet Anne Weems, who talks about seekers in search of their kneeling places. To pay homage is to find that kneeling place and to kneel before the one we worship and serve. In search of our kneeling places. Let me ask you, on this side of the Christmas season, did you find any time to kneel? Did you find any kneeling places? Or have you been so busy that you didn't find a time or place to kneel? Now, I've noticed in my travels, I went to Montreat for New Year's with some friends and traveled through the mountains, and I've noticed in my trips through the mountains there are lots of good places to stop and kneel in the mountains in particular. I can think of two. One is obvious, a scenic overlook. Do you ever pull off and look at those, or are you too busy going somewhere? The other good place to kneel is a runaway truck ramp. I'm sure there are plenty of truckers that have ended up there and ended up on their knees. Epiphany is a good time to kneel, to find our kneeling places. The wise men didn't know where they'd end up kneeling. They followed the star and they paid him homage. And when they got there, they did kneel and they opened their gifts and gave them to him. Direction leads to devotion, to paying homage. And then it leads to redirection, to going home by another way. That's how our text ends. Instead of going back to Herod, they were told in a dream to return to their own country by another way. Years ago, when I was doing youth ministry, we went to the Montreat Youth Conference and celebrated Epiphany in July. The theme of the conference was home by another way. And so our text was this story, the story of the wise ones. All of the leaders at that conference, the preachers, the keynoters, the small group leaders, encouraged us to take the mountaintop experience that is a summer youth retreat and bring it back into the valleys of our everyday existence, to talk about how we would leave that conference and go home by another way. As I said, all the leaders of that conference wanted to get that point across in different ways, but it was conference participants themselves who communicated that point most clearly. And I will read to you their assessment. Now let me give you some context first before I do that. This was written by a group of young people who decided around, 6 o'clock or so to go hiking in the mountains. And one of the lessons they learned is the sun sets in a hurry in the hills. And they got lost. And here is the lesson they learned, 5 of them. 5 points, going home by another way, from the Presbyterians who once were lost but now are found. 1, going home by another way is dangerous. You can get hurt and lost easier than not. We'd all like to say that you should not try this at home without parental and park ranger supervision, but that's a decision you must make on your own. 2, going home by another way is confusing and involves many decisions. You don't know if you're taking the right road until it's all over. 3, going home by another way often leads to dead ends, which you have to deal with and decide what God is telling you through those dead ends. 4, going home by another way involves risk that you can't really see when you first begin your journey. And 5, although we really wanted to find our own way home by ourselves, there was no sweeter sound than the rumble of a four-wheeler around the bend and a concerned park ranger asking, "You're lost, right?" We had to realize that we needed help and accept that amazing saving grace. And to that God, whose grace is always amazing, be all praise, honor, and glory forever. Amen.